What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video of Cup of Code 01. Today we're knocking out a video for the series 100 Days in Python to Python Mastery. And of course, once you get to day 101, you're done, right? Yeah. So let's get into it. First off, we have accept a string and calculate the number of letters and the digits. So we have s equals input, and then I have a string that says give me a string. So when I first run this, it says, give me a string. So I will write, this is a string, yo. And I'm going to hit enter. And it tells me letters, there are 15, digits, there are 0. Enter password is just the next part of code. So let's see what we got here. We have S was the user input, which I just put in. L, comma D equals 0, comma 0. That's the same as saying L equals, or count equals 0, count D equals 0. We're just creating the counts for it. So we're giving those values inputs, starting points. We could have done L equals 0, D equals 0, but cleaner just to do it this way. One of the things we're going to be striving for with 100 Days to Python is over time making your code cleaner, more readable, and more Pythonic, if you will. For C in S, so that's more just our counts in our string. For counts in string, you could have wrote for count in string, but for C in S, if C dot is alpha, so is alpha is a method. So if C, so if character, think of C as character, if character dot is alpha, L equals L plus 1. So then letter would starting at 0 equals letter plus 1. So when it's going through what I wrote this is a string, yo. So it gets to T. Is T an alpha? Yeah. So letter goes from 0 to 1. And that will hit true, so then we can start the loop over again. When it got to the space, it wasn't going to count that. When it got, so let's do a digit. Let me, for the sake of this, let's do, my favorite number is 21 and 3. So then when it was going through this code here, and it got to the number 2 in my string, if C is alpha, false. Else C is digit, true. Digit equals D plus 1, or D equals D plus 1. So we were at 0, so it went to 1. Else pass. So if it's not a letter, and if it's not a digit, you may say, what the hell is it? Well, we do have spaces here. Space, space, we have white space is what it's called. Space, space, and space. So those we're saying pass. We're not asking to count the spaces. We're not counting character location. And then we just say print letters, the string letters, comma, the value for L when all of this is run, and print digits with the value of D when all of this is run. So all of this is doing is this is iterating. It's a for loop that we're iterating over our string to say, are you a letter? Oh, you're a letter? All right, we're going to add 1 to our letter count. Next one, you're a letter? Oh, we're going to add another 1 to our letter count. You're a space? So you fall, you're a space, so you fall into my else part of the code, which means pass, so I don't care. Next one, letters, so letter goes up another one, another one, another one, space, don't care, another, yada, yada, yada. Are you a letter? No. I have more code. Are you a digit? Yes, digit goes up by 1. So then all it's doing is just adding those, keep storing that into memory, and then adding it all at the end to give us our letter count and our digit count. Now we have password. What we're going to be doing is we're going to enter a password, and this part of the code is going to check the validity of the password, meaning is it even a valid password? So you've done this many times when you're you're on a website and you're trying to put in a password, and it may say not valid, too short, or not valid too long, or you're missing capital letters, or you're missing a special character. So what we're doing is we're just writing code right now to check if a password somebody's putting in is even valid or not. Not if it's going to pass the password, but if it's valid or not. So to check the validity of the password, we want to have at least a lowercase letter and at least one uppercase letter. So there's 2 criteria, a lowercase and an uppercase. At least one number and at least one special character. So now we got 4 different parameters, upper, lower, number, character. And it has to be at least 6 characters long, but not longer than 16. So each one of those elements gives us another line of code to check for the password. So P is our input. P equals input. I'm sorry, before I got there, I have import re. RE stands for regular expressions. It's one of the Python libraries. And we're going to use re a lot whenever we're trying to do matching operations. So We're putting in a password and we're trying to put a password against our code to see if there's matches against the different parameters that we put in. So we're going to be using re a lot when we do different search methods. So import re, regular expression. P equals input, and then I have enter password, which you'll see on the right hand side in the console. X equals true. So while X, I could have also just wrote while true. While true, let's put a password in. Let's say I'm going to put Frank. So I have uppercase, I have lowercase, I have a special character. I only need one. I'll put in a number. That met everything, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is 7 characters, so it's going to work. So I'll hit enter, and it's going to run the rest of the code, so you can ignore this. So what did it actually do? Well, why don't we run the debugger for this, because that will make it a little bit easier to see. Let me close this down. I want to move this to the upper right-hand side. Come on. To the right. So give me a string. So this is for the first part. That's that enter password. I said we did Frank, we did a special character, and I did a number, and I hit enter. Let me go to my console. So now here we are. So you can see for the variable P, it has Frank. That's what I put in as my input, and X is true. So I'm going to F8 through this. So while F is true. So if length of P is less than 6 or length of P is greater than 16, break. So break means you're no longer going to go to the next line of code. So normally when you hit a line of code, if the answer is false, it goes to the next line of code, and it keeps going until it gets a true. In this case, though, if it does get a false, it's going to break, because it doesn't want you to go to the next, because it might meet the next criteria, and we don't want it to pass. So as an example, if that says if length is less than 6, let's say the length was 5, but we had a capital, we had a lowercase, we had a number, we had a special character. If we didn't have the break, then it would have said false, and then it would have went to the next line of code and would have said, oh yeah, it has a lowercase, it has an uppercase, it has a number, and then it would have gave me a pass. It would have gave me a true at the end. But we don't want that, so we put a break statement in. So it's if all of these have to be met, all of these have to be hit as true in order for the whole loop to be executed. And to get to the final return. So we're F8ing through. So if is the length greater than 6 and less than 16, it is. So we'll go to the next line of code. We're not going to break is the point. Else if not, read.search, and then I have in brackets as like a list lowercase a comma a dash z, lowercase both of them, comma p. So the comma p is the input that we use, the Frank exclamation 2. So what we're saying is I want the regular expression to search A through Z. And if there's not a lowercase letter, break. But there is a lowercase letter. So we're going to go to the next line of code. So F8, so it found lowercase. Else if not a number, break. But there is a number. We have the number 2 in our variable. So we're going to get to the next line. Else if not in that search, an uppercase. But there is an uppercase. So we're not going to break. We're going to go to the next line. Else if not in that search, a special character. And here I specified those 3 different characters that I can use, which will be interesting. Let's see what happens. In that, then go to the next line or break. So we broke. See how it says break? And I'm going to F8, and you'll see why in a moment. If X print, I'm going to hit that just so you can see that it fails. Awesome. So on the right-hand side, you can see that is a BS password. You are banned for life. So why did that happen? You may say exclamation point is a special character, and you're right, it is. But look what I put in my code. I have if not dollar sign, number sign, or the @ sign, then break. And it wasn't that. I have an exclamation point. So if not in searching this, if one of these is not there, then break. And that was true. One of them was not there. So it had to go and it had to break the code. So I didn't even get to go to this last portion here. So what it did was it went to the next executable line outside of that loop, which was if X print, that is a BS password, and that's exactly what we did. So what I can do is I can rerun this. This was just from before, and I'll put in Frank, whoops a daisy, we'll do 21, and this time I will put a $sign in. So I have uppercase, I have lowercase, I have a number, and I have a special character. We're greater than 6, we're less than 16. So you can see it ran through the whole code this time. So this time when it got down to the special characters, it passed because it does have one of the 3 characters I specified, which in this case is the $sign. And then it went to, if regarding the search, \s, this matches white spaces. Remember I was saying before how we weren't counting those up here with letters and digits? So if there's any white spaces, it becomes true and it breaks the code. If in the search there's any white spaces, then break. So if it is there, break it. So sometimes people get confused with the knots and so forth. So we'll kind of work backwards. Look at this part. If regarding the search, in the regular expression search of P, if there's any white spaces, break the code because white spaces are not permitted. Now, looking at these, we're saying while searching P, if you don't find, that's the not, if you don't find one of these, break the code. So that's how that not is fitting into place there. And of course, after all this, we have else print, password check is a green light. So that else happens because this was true, this was true. In a sense, when we search P, if it's not there, then break, but it was there. So we go to the next line and we keep going until we finally get to the else. Print the password check, because all of these were false in the sense that, were there white spaces? No. Was there in A through Z? Yes. This is saying if it's not there, break it. If it was there, so we go to the next line and so forth. Print x now equals false, and then we can break, because again, this is only while x equals true. And then we saw this other piece here when we had the wrong password. Next, we have the find numbers between 100 and 400, both included. So remember, when we do ranges, if we do range 100 to 400, it will go 100 to 399. So if we want 400, we have to go to 401 in the range, if we're using the range function. Both included, where each digit is even. Print in CSV sequence. So I'm going to create just first off an empty list. Even digits equals an empty list. For I in range 100 to 401, again, because the first number is including, the last number is excluding. So we're not going to do 401, but we'll do 400. S equals the string of I. So now what we're saying is, we'll read this slowly because this can get it looks a little messy, right? So S equals the string of I. For I in range, so this first line of code, I is a integer, right? So for I in range, I is going to be 100, it's going to be 101, 102, 103. It's going to keep going up in integers. Now here I'm creating another variable S. S, I want it to be the string version of I. So all that means is that if I printed out the integer, I, when it's an integer of 2, it would print out like 2. If I print out the string of I when I is 2, it'll just print out like that. It'll actually give me the string version of it. That's all. So if the integer s, which is just the different representation. So here we said s is a string, and there's a reason for that, because we're going to be using a join function down here below, and you can't join on integers, but you can join on strings. So if integer, so we have s index 0, s is a string of I, modulus 2 equals 0, and integer s index 1 modulo 2 equals 0, and this will make sense to you in a second, and integer s index 2 modulo 2 equals 0. So you know from before, this modulo 2 is saying about division, the remainder after division. So if I take any of these numbers and I divide it by 2, is there a remainder? Yes, then you fail, because you're not equal to 0. If there's no remainder, then you're equal to 0. The modulo 2 is equal to 0, and then it's true. So you might say, what is this 0, 1, and 2? Well, look at our range. They're 3-digit numbers. So what this is saying is that in order to do this, it's taking the first index number and saying, for that index, modulo 2 equals 0, and the second one, modulo 2 equals 0, and the third digit, modulo 2 equals 0. If all three of those conditions are true, if true and true and true, even digits dot append s, then it's saying append s, and s is the string of I. So what that's saying is whatever that number for I is at that moment, I want you to add it to the string of I in the even digits list, which is an empty list right now we're starting off with. And then at the end I just have print $signs dot join even digits. So it's going to take all of the different values for even digits, join them together, and I'm just separating the digits with the space $sign space. Well, actually we'll just put 1 because that's otherwise it's going to get messy as hell. Test password, I want it to pass because I don't want the code to execute out. So that's fine. Awesome. All right. So let's go through this code looking at the output that we actually get. There was one other thing I wanted to make. Oh, you may say, but a number might have 310, which is modulo 2 is 0. And it's you might say, but it's an even number, and I get it. But the question says find numbers from 100 and 400, both included, where each digit is even. So 3 ain't even. 1 ain't even. So that what 310 would be false. So when I look at my printout list, let's even look here. Do we even get 310 as an output? We shouldn't, and no, we don't. We shouldn't get any 300 when you think about it, because 3 ain't divisible by, it's not going to be a modulo 2. There's no way to get a modulo 2 equals 0 with a 3 or a 1. Any odd number. So looking at our output, we have 200 space $sign space 202. So this is our .join function. So what happened was, as this went through, I'm not going to do a debugger through this because it would be, can you imagine going 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, it'd be crazy. But what it's doing is, for each I, the I is doing that, and it's saying for I, let's take 100. It says if the first is modulo 2 equals 0, nope, 1 modulo 2 is not 0. So that's already a fail. So now I is going to then go to 101. And then it's going to say if index 0 modulo 2 equals 0, false. Go back. For all the 100s, 199, it's going to do that because it's never going to pass the first index function, the first index element. And then it's going to get to 200. And now we get for s, when I is 200, and s is a string of I, index, because you're not really indexing integers, we're indexing strings. Index 0 is now 2 if the range of 200. 2 modulo 2 equals 0, true. And the second one, 0 modulo 2 equals 0, 0 modulo anything is going to be 0. So that's going to be true. And the third digit, which is also 0, modulo 2 is 0, is going to equal 0. That's true. So 200 should be our first number, and sure enough, it is. And then when we get to 201, it would read like this. 2 modulo 2 equals 0, true. 0 modulo 2 equals 0, true. And 1 modulo 2 equals 0, false. So 201 is not going to print, but 202 will print. And then you'll see that we're going to have all of these where all 3 digits are even, going all the way through. So then you'll see the 40s. We're not going to see any of the 50s because the 5 would never pass for this first index portion of the modulo 2. And it's going to go all the way up. We're going to skip all the 300s, of course, and we actually include 400. So we met our criteria. So good. And if you wanted to know, how many numbers do I have? How many pieces did we append into this even digits empty list? Well, you could have just done an even digits length. You're going to print the length, parentheses, even digits, and that would have given you the number of input variables that went into it. So create a program that will print out a pattern of A. So you can see the output already. We printed out the letter A using stars. And this one, I probably had one error that drove me nuts for about 20 minutes. And like all coding, you're going to have massive errors your entire career in coding. And that's what you spend most of your time doing, is debugging errors, where it's like, no, I know what my output should be, but I'm not getting it. So let me show you exactly what was happening to me, and how I can reproduce that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, because I don't, and I personally hate copying and pasting code, because many times you do that and it's not going to run. But let me run test and see if I get my A. I do. So let's run through this, and then I'll show you what my error was. Actually, I'm just going to reproduce it now. Maybe you saw that. Look at that. Looks like a weird old F. So what this was saying is letter A equals an empty string. That's all that is. I'm curious if I do. Yeah, no. So letter A equals an empty string. For row in range 0 to 7, so why 7? You could have picked any number, but you have to make sure however much you're going to the right, you have that many. So I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if this was an index of 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I could have I could have done range, 0 to 4 if I wanted to. But in terms of the columns, it just makes it easier for me because then I can get spaces on the left and right if need be. I did want to show this. I meant to hook up my tablet so I can draw this out. I want you to imagine like graph paper, a graph box where it's 7 by 7. So it's a 7 by 7 box, 7 rows, 7 columns. And that'll make more sense to this as we go through this to visualize those pieces. So for row in range 0, 7, for column in range 0, 7. So we're starting with rows and we're going column. And this one, you know what? Let's debug it. Let's do run the debug. Here we go, F8. Oh, I should hit F8 if I want to go. So it creates my variable letter A. Row is 0, column is 0. If column equals 1 or column equals 5, so both of them don't have to be true. If only one of them is true, we can go to the next part. So if column equals 1 or column equals 5, so on your visual graph paper, we're going index column 0, 1, and then skipping 2, 3, 4, index 5. So if we're in column 1 or column 5 and row does not equal 0, that's our first expression, or row does not equal 0 or row does not equal 3, so either one of those, and column is greater than 1 and column is less than 5, then do the following. Letter A equals letter A plus a star. So if any portions of this are true, print a star. Else, letter A equals letter A, and it's just a space. So letter A, of course, is our empty list. Letter A equals letter A plus a new line. I just put that at the end. And then, of course, printing out letter A. So let's see what happens as we go through this. So now I'm down in this else portion. So all I did just now in row 0, column 0, we printed out a space. You just don't see the spaces. So now you'll see we're at row 0, column 1. So it goes along in rows because row is the first portion in the for loop. So what's going to happen in column 1? Well, column 1 equals 1. That's true. And row does not equal 0. Look at the top. Row does equal 0. So we know we're not going to do anything there. So it's going to print a space. Now we're row 0, column 2. So column equals 1, no. Or column equals 5, no. So I'm out of that part. Or row equals 0, yes. And column is greater than 1, yes. It's 2 right now. And column is less than 5, yep, it's 2. Print a star. So I should see a star come out or be put in my variable. So look here, letter A. Now we have a star here. So we have space, space, star. Now we're going to go row 0, column 3. And column equals 1, nope. Column equals 5, nope. So we're skipping that next part. Row equals 0, yes. Column is greater than 1 and less than 5, yes. So watch this star up top. It's going to follow the next line of code, which is print another star. So it does it accordingly. Row 0, still row 0, column 3. Column equals 1, nope. 5, nope. Row equals 0, yes. Column greater than 1, less than 5, yes. So we're going to print out another star. And now we're going to go column 5. Column equals 1, no. Or 5, yes. And row does not equal 0, nope. Row equals 0 still. Row equals 0, yep. Column is greater than 1, absolutely. And less than 5, no, it's equal to 5. So we're going to skip this printing of the star, and it's going to go to the else portion of the code, which is just going to print a space. Now we're going to go 0, 6. Column ain't 1, column ain't 5. Row is still 0, so we're here. Column is greater than 1. I guess I really should just do this, huh? Column is greater than 1, and it's greater than 5, so we're skipping this, and we're going to print a space again. And now I'm row 0, column 6. Watch 6 change now. And I have a new line. I printed a new line. And why did I do that? Because column 6 was not going to fit anywhere in this if statement. So when I got row 0, column 6, if you go through this, it fits nowhere. So this whole thing is false. So it goes to the next executable, which is else, print a space. And then it wasn't going to be a space either because it was not even going to fit inside this if loop. So it has to jump to the next executable in the for loop, which is letter A equals letter A plus n. So letter A equals letter A, which is this portion that we've done so far, the 3 stars, plus a new line. So let's go through. Now you'll see, again, you don't go to 7 because it's not including the last number in a range. It goes up to, but not including. So we're actually doing 0 to 6, but it is 7 columns. So now we switched over to row 1. So now we know that this row up here is done. So now we're row 1, column 6. You're going to see that column change over to 0. That's appropriate. So now thinking of the graph paper, we just did row 0, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're doing row 0, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's going to keep going through this method. I'll go through this one slow again, and then I'm just going to fast debug through the rest of it. So row is now 1, column equals 0. Column equal 1, no. Column equal 5, no. Row equals 0, no. Row equals 3, no. And so we don't even get to that end portion there. So what are we going to do? We're printing out a space. So it did the space. You just don't see that. Column equals 1 and row equals 1. Column equals 1, yep. And row does not equal 0, true. Go to the next line, print a star. Now we're going to go column 2. Column 1, nope. Column 5, nope. Row 0 or row 3, nope. So what are we going to do? That's right, we're going to print a space. Now we're going column 3. You can see right there, column 3 is, and row is 1 is not going to fit anywhere. So we're going to be printing a space again. Row 1, column 4. So row 1, column 4, if going through the code again, you're going to find that we're not fitting anywhere yet. So we're going to print a space in the else statement because the if code is not being met as true. Now we are column 5. So the first part, column equals 1, nope. Column 5, yes. And row does not equal 0, true. We can print a star. And now we're going row 1, column 6. This is our last column for row 1. Column equals 6, you're going to see, and row 1 is not going to fit anywhere, so we're going to print a space. And now we're outside of the column loop. So now we're going to be printing the next part of the code, which of the for loop, which is going to be the new line. So now that means we're going to see row turn from 1 to 2. Column's going to go back to 0. Now I'm just going to go through this, and by all means you can do this on your own accord, but you can see that it's printing it on the top right under the letter A variable. We're having all of the different printouts, and I don't have to slow down until I get to row 6, column 6, because that's when I know I'm going to be done essentially. Row 6, there we go, column 5, column 6. When I get to column 6 up here, in the 4 column in range loop is now done. So we're going to print a new line. The 4 row in range loop is done. So we're going to go to the last executable line of code, which is the print letter A. So now if you're watching to the right, it's going to take all of this and actually interpret it. And we get this, and you're going, what the hell? It looks like a weird F. Why did I not get an A? I didn't have anything. If you look at this as, pretend this is column 0, row 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're sitting here going, I didn't have crap in column 0 or column 1 in the beginning of this code. Why is it doing this? This drove me nuts for a while, and this all happened because of this little bugger right here. So in the else statement, if any part of these columns were not met, meaning if I'm not printing a star, I'm printing a space. But I did not put a space here. I just put a string. So I told, this is telling Python, letter A plus string, but there's nothing in it. There's no other character. There's not a space. So when I did this, you don't see me, but I'm holding my space bar. Watch the code, space. And now I run it, you get the letter A. Because now, and it makes sense, it's frustrating, but it makes sense. Now it's interpreting it as saying it wants a space for the else statement to be added to the string of letter A. It doesn't just want an empty string. So when you're doing your code exercises, don't get discouraged. Please run through them over and over and over again. Practice this stuff. Try for a different letter. I really advise drawing out the graph paper and numbering them, row 0 to 6, column 0 to 6, and then use stars or use X's, whatever, and draw the letter. Let's say you do the letter C, all right? And then as you're going through your code, to the right of that row, write down what it means. In the sense of, like, if row 0, column 0 is not filled in, then don't go by what's not filled in, go by what is. So if you're doing the letter C, you might say, If row is 0 and column 2, then print the star. And you can use your and and your ifs. If you guys want more exercises with the letters, by all means let me know. If you're not getting what I'm saying about the graph paper, then let me know as well, and I'll grab out my my drawing tablet, and I'll draw for you on here exactly what it is I mean in terms of looking at this as graph paper, because again, computers see things in a pixelated format. So creating a 7x7 grid, it's essentially thinking it's looking at like, not thinking, but essentially it's looking at like a 49 pixel grid image is what it's doing. And then it's just going accordingly from the code. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this video. Have an excellent day, and I will see you next time on 100 Days to Python Mastery.